So those things are really important for them for life, but also a fun and important way to learn it. And that carrot's a good little carrot to dangle, and I have to say, it works. The other piece is when we go away, they may have problems. Jim is well aware that I've spent at least 3 lifetimes on Diveheart trips in the bathroom, helping kids. Not in the water, not diving, hanging out in the bathroom. That's a powerful piece too, because then they learn what they're not doing right, what they need to do differently. So those things are really important skills for our kids to be able to have. And Diveheart and a collaboration with Shriners allows us to help move those kids along. We're not going to see them anymore after they're 21. But I certainly hope when I hear how they're doing, I recently got an email from one of my former patients who said, "Oh, I just saw Jim Elliott." That's what I want to see, that they're out. I don't care who they're with. I want them diving with you. I want them diving with you. I want those kids to know that they can be out and doing anything they want, and that their level of independence will allow them to do that, or that their level of communication and assertiveness will allow them to show someone else how to do that and help them so that they can participate. For us means that we put kids in the water when they're ready. So sometimes that may mean they sit at the edge of the pool and you get nowhere. Sometimes it may mean that they're in the water and they put on a regulator and they put on a mask and their head never goes under. Sometimes it means they just duck their head part way in. We really try to let our kids particularly decide how much they want to do. I have to tell you, about 90% of the time, it may start out slow. They all end up at the bottom of the pool, but they're in a good way. But the reality is, oops. But the reality is we are very strong on that philosophy because these kids have a lot of things they don't have choices about. And because we want them to be able to make choices about their own body as much as they can, and to make choices about what they do or don't want to do, because there are some things based on their disabilities that adults, healthcare providers, we just dictate. So that's an important piece of our philosophy. Safety considerations, I think this is important for those of you who are maybe new to working with people with disabilities. You certainly need medical approval. That's important to ensure that they have been checked out by their primary providers and physicians, and to make sure that they are cleared for diving. We also always choose to underdive the tables. There's not enough research out there on people with disabilities that really lets us know exactly all the effects on folks with disabilities, so underdiving the tables makes some sense. A 1-to-1 participant ratio, we actually, because we work with kids, we often have a 2-to-1 and sometimes a 3-to-1, which I think is particularly important. But minimally, if you're working with someone, never less than a 1-to-1 participant ratio. All of our folks are HSA certified instructors and dive buddies. And for us specifically, we're very careful about things, and this is true for spinal cord injury. It's also true if you're working with kids who have spina bifida, also known as myelomeningocele, with latex and latex allergies. It has gotten better over the years. There's not as much latex in diving as there used to be. Everything, I swear, was latex for a while. But we're very careful about that because our kids are susceptible to latex allergies. And so we try to decrease their exposure to latex, and that has to do with how much they are exposed. So for example, if you have a spinal cord injury, you're probably on an intermittent catheterization program. So you use a small tube and you catheterize to get your urine out every 4 hours. Those catheters always used to be latex. You probably have seen them. They used to be red rubber. We'd call them red rubber catheters. We don't use those anymore. We use latex free because what we found was all that exposure in the mucous membranes increases the likelihood you'll have an allergy. Then when you develop a latex allergy, the next thing that happens is you start to have allergic reactions to latex. Eventually, you'll end up in full anaphylaxis. So we avoid all latex at all possible. If we can't avoid latex, we try to minimize that exposure. We always carry EpiPens, whether our kids are latex positive or not. And then things like body temperature, sun, dehydration, meds. It's a combination of things. Now, this isn't to scare those of you who don't work with people with disabilities and think, I don't want to work with those kids with disabilities. They got a lot of issues. Remember, the goal is for the kids to know this. The goal isn't for me to walk up to a kid who's sitting in the sun, who's totally overheating because he has temperature regulation problems, and say, go to the shade, drink some water, and put on some sunscreen. That's not the goal. The goal is for that child to recognize it themselves. We often have to start out in little steps. And again, we work with a lot of teenage boys, and plenty of you in this room used to be teenage boys, so you can imagine that sometimes it is a struggle, and we have to remind them a lot. But the important thing is that the person with the disability needs to know. If they have the ability to understand these issues, they need to know and to share that information with you. You know, really, truly, organization and logistics comes down to a couple of key things. One, you need to be working with, for us, we need to be working with folks who are dive professionals, who we trust, who are safe, and who can help guide us in the right direction at all times. That's incredibly important. As dive professionals, you need to be the experts in the water. As healthcare professionals, we need to be your resource and the expert on land. That's really what it comes down to organizationally. And importantly, communication. Making sure that you are communicating all of your kids' issues and needs, and sometimes those don't have anything to do with their disability. Sometimes that has to do with personality quirk. Or that you're also willing to collaborate and share information back and forth. My Diveheart buddies will happily tell you about a day where we were this far away from certifying all our kids in the Keys, and I looked at my good friend Dawn as they were coming up, and I was like, it's getting rough, and they're tired, and they're all on the verge of puking, and every single one of those kids was going to say, I want to go back in the water. And Jim Elliott would have liked him in the water. And I said, no. And it was a bummer. And somebody got certified like by a boat in a terrible area away from an oil spill. I mean, we made it work. But the reality is, communication is the key. And you have to work with people that you can comfortably communicate with. Agree to disagree. Say, no, I got to have it this way. No, you got to have it this way. I mean, that's really important. Again, for those of us who work in peds, it's critical. I think it's important for everybody working with folks with disabilities and with adults as well. You know, accessibility I always talk about, and it makes me laugh because I like to have it. I like for the world to be an accessible place. For those of you who don't do a lot of stuff with folks with disabilities, even with the ADA, the world is not necessarily an accessible place. And that makes me crazy, but it should never be an obstacle from stopping you. You're safe, and you help kids, and you transfer them, and you pick up their wheelchairs with 4 people if you need to. You ask them if they want to stay in their chair or if they want to be transferred out and be carried and somebody carries their chair, but you don't let the obstacles stop them. So that's an incredibly important piece. And you can learn how to get around those obstacles safely. And there's lots of folks who've been working now with people with disabilities for long enough that they will share all their stories and help you understand how to get around those obstacles. So, more importantly, you've heard a little bit about what I've had to say, but who cares? What about what the kids say? And you heard me mention earlier, we do a lot of research and we do program evaluation. These are direct quotes from our kids who participated in our Diveheart programs. This is what they tell us. I never realized pushing myself to the limit could be so rewarding. My experience here was something I never thought I would ever experience. And that quote is from somebody who, when I asked them in a follow-up interview, you mean because you have a spinal cord injury? That kid said, no, I mean I never thought I would get to do this ever in my lifetime, even if I hadn't had a spinal cord injury. I only dreamed of what just happened to me, and I've learned lots of things on this trip, but the most important thing I learned is to never give up. And that tells us we're being successful. That tells us that our kids are getting the message we want them to get. Now, our group likes to say, we go under the motto as life is either a daring adventure or nothing at all. I see a lot of kids who get hurt because of adventurous activities. And I think some folks and some medical folks would say, you know, they got hurt because of an adventurous activity. They shouldn't do adventurous activities anymore. And I'll tell you that's straight out wrong. You mitigate your risk. As you all well know, probably preach to the choir here, diving is a safe sport. And diving is a powerful sport for kids with disabilities, and it's a powerful therapeutic sport for kids with disabilities. It's not just about getting a nice little certification card. It's about helping them move to the next level of their lives after they've sustained an injury or because of their disability. And we never, ever want to have kids feel like they can't participate in these kinds of activities and move on in their lives and continue to have it be powerful and therapeutic for them.